The great meeting hall of Nexus Prime stretched out like a metallic flower, its walls curved and gleaming under the soft blue light that made all the different alien species comfortable. Representatives from 43 worlds sat in their special chairs, each designed for their unique body shapes. Some breathed different gases through masks, others floated in gravity fields, and a few existed as pure energy contained in crystal shells. Commander Zthar adjusted his position on the heated stone that served as his seat. His reptilian scales caught the light as he moved, creating patterns of green and gold across his broad shoulders. As the representative of the hegemony of scales, he had attended these monthly gatherings for over 20 cycles. The routine never changed much. They discussed trade agreements, settled small disputes between worlds, and shared cultural stories to keep peace among the stars. "The formal session is now complete," announced the station's artificial intelligence in a voice that translated perfectly into each species' language. "We begin the traditional time of cultural exchange." This was Zthar's favorite part. Each month, different representatives would share stories from their home worlds, myths, legends, and old tales that helped everyone understand each other better. It was a diplomatic tradition started centuries ago when the first Galactic Peace Treaty was signed. Ambassador Ara of the Ethereal Collective floated forward first. She was a being of shifting light, contained within a transparent form that moved like water. When she spoke, her voice sounded like musical chimes. "Our archives contain stories of the ancient builders," she began. "Beings who could shape matter, with their thoughts and travel between stars without ships. They vanished long before our civilization began, leaving only empty worlds behind." The assembled representatives nodded politely. Every species had stories of mysterious ancients who had come before. It was a common theme across the galaxy. Next came Dr. Corvain from the Silicon Brotherhood. His crystalline body rang like a bell when he moved. "We speak of the endless swarm," he said. "Creatures of flesh and metal who consumed entire star systems before burning out like a plague. They exist now only in our oldest memory crystals." More nods. More ancient monsters safely buried in the past. Then it was Zthar's turn. He stood slowly, his claws clicking against the stone floor. The other representatives turned their attention to him, expecting another story of long-dead threats or vanished builders. "My people remember the deathworlders," Zthar began, his voice carrying the weight of genuine fear passed down through generations. "But these were not ancient beings of mystery. They were real, they were recent, and they were the most terrifying thing the galaxy has ever known." A curious silence fell over the hall. Several representatives leaned forward in their seats. "According to our oldest records," Zthar continued, "these creatures evolved on a world so hostile that it should have been impossible for complex life to survive. The planet spun around a violent star that threw deadly radiation across its surface. The atmosphere contained a poison gas that burned through organic tissue. The weather included frozen water that fell from the sky and electrical storms that could kill with a single touch." Ambassador Ara's light flickered with interest. "Surely no world could be so harsh." "But it was," Zthar insisted. "The surface was covered with liquid water that could drown air-breathing creatures, and this water was filled with aggressive predators. The land moved and shook, splitting open to release burning rock. Ice covered vast areas for thousands of cycles at a time, then melted to flood everything." Dr. Vexani from the Academic Union spoke up. She was a tall, thin being with 4 arms and pale blue skin. "Commander, these sound like the exaggerated fears of primitive peoples. No species could evolve under such conditions." "That is what we thought," Zthar replied. "But these deathworlders did more than survive. They thrived. Our records say they grew strong from the constant struggle. They could heal from wounds that would kill any of us. They could function in temperatures that would freeze our blood or boil our organs. They breathed that poison atmosphere as easily as we breathe safe gas. The reptilian commander began walking around the circular hall as he spoke, his tale growing more intense. But the worst part was not their physical abilities. It was their minds. These creatures did not just endure conflict. They sought it out. They fought each other constantly, not just for resources or territory, but for ideas and beliefs. They turned warfare into an art form. They created weapons that could split atoms and destroy entire worlds. "Impossible," whispered Captain Thorne, of the Aquatic Federation, bubbles rising around her gills. "Evolution favors cooperation and peace. Conflict wastes energy." "Not for them," Zthar said grimly. "Conflict made them stronger. They would throw themselves into impossible situations and find ways to win. When one of their kind was injured, they would become more dangerous, not less. When cornered, they would fight with such fury that entire armies would flee in terror." "Doctor." Vexani's 4 hands moved quickly across her datapad. "I have been studying ruins in the Outer Rim territories. Some of the artifacts I found show strange symbols and images of bipedal creatures engaged in violent activities. I assumed they were artistic representations of mythical concepts." "What kind of images?" Zthar asked, his scales darkening with concern. "Figures in protective coverings, carrying weapons and tools. Scenes of great battles and explosions. Structures built for defense rather than beauty. I thought they were primitive expressions of struggle against natural forces." The hall grew quiet as the implications sank in. Ambassador Lumara's light pulsed with worry. "Are you suggesting that these deathworlders were real beings? That they actually existed?" "Our oldest stories all agree on certain details," Zthar said. "They were approximately 2 meters tall with 4 limbs and thick bones. They had forward-facing eyes like predators and sharp teeth for cutting flesh. Their skin could change color from pale to dark, adapting to different environments. They could run for great distances without stopping and survive for days without food or water." Captain Thorne's water suit made nervous, bubbling sounds. "But where are they now? If they were so powerful, why are we not living under their rule?" "Because they destroyed themselves," Zthar answered. "The same nature that made them unstoppable also made them unable to live in peace. They spread across the stars, fighting and conquering, but they could not stop fighting each other. Eventually, their wars became so terrible that their entire civilization collapsed. Their home world was left as a burned rock, and their colonies went silent one by one." Dr. Corvain's crystal body chimed with skepticism. "It seems convenient that such a powerful species would simply vanish at the moment they became too dangerous to tolerate." "Perhaps," Zthar admitted. "But the stories are consistent across dozens of species who had no contact with each other. The details match, too closely to be coincidence." Dr. Vexani looked up from her datapad, her pale face troubled. "The dating on my artifacts suggests they are approximately 50,000 cycles old. That matches the time frame you describe." "What else have you found?" asked Ambassador Lumara. "Structures built to withstand massive damage, tools designed for harsh environments, and something else. Writing systems that seem far more complex than the civilization level suggested by the ruins, as if they were designed to preserve information across long periods of destruction." The meeting hall fell into an uncomfortable silence. Representatives shifted in their seats, each lost in their own thoughts about what this might mean. Minister Veltar of the Peaceful Aggregate finally spoke. His soft, gray form trembled slightly as he asked, "If these creatures were real, and if they spread across the galaxy as you suggest, where did they all go?" You cannot hide billions of individuals even across multiple star systems. The stories say they had great ships that could travel between galaxies, Zthar replied. Perhaps the survivors fled to distant places beyond our reach. Or perhaps they simply died out, Dr. Corvain suggested hopefully. Even the most adaptable species can face extinction when their environment changes too rapidly. Dr. Vexani continued studying her data. I am finding references to something called terraforming in the partial translations I have completed. It appears to describe changing entire worlds to match their preferred conditions rather than adapting themselves to existing environments. Terraforming? Ambassador Lumara's light flickered rapidly. That would require technology beyond anything we possess. The energy costs alone would bankrupt entire star systems. Unless, Zthar said slowly, you had already conquered enough worlds to afford such projects, and unless your species saw impossible challenges as opportunities rather than obstacles. The implications hung heavy in the air. A species that could reshape worlds, that thrived on conflict, and that had vanished just as galactic civilization was beginning to develop. It was too convenient to be coincidence, too consistent to be myth. Captain Thorne broke the silence, with a nervous laugh that bubbled through her water suit. Well, at least we know they are gone. Whatever happened to them, it was long ago. The galaxy is peaceful now. We have learned to solve problems through discussion and cooperation. Yes, agreed Minister Veltar, his gray form becoming more solid with relief. We are civilized beings. We do not seek conflict or destruction. Such creatures could not exist in our modern galaxy. Dr. Vexani nodded, though she continued studying her data. I will continue my research into these ruins. If nothing else, they represent an important archaeological discovery. We may learn valuable lessons about the dangers of unchecked aggression. Ambassador Lumara's light returned to its normal, steady glow. Perhaps that is the purpose of these stories, to remind us why we choose peace over war, cooperation over conquest. Indeed, Zthar agreed, though his scales remained darker than usual. The myths serve as warnings. They show us what we could become if we forget the value of civilization. The session ended with the traditional closing ceremony, each representative offering a blessing for continued peace among the stars. But, as they departed for their ships and home worlds, many carried with them a new unease. Dr. Vexani remained behind, studying her datapad long after the others had gone. The images from her archaeological sites seemed different now, viewed through the lens of Zthar's stories. The structures were not primitive defenses against natural forces. They were sophisticated fortifications designed by minds that understood warfare on a galactic scale. The symbols were not artistic expressions. They were technical specifications and operational manuals for weapons and equipment far beyond current galactic technology. And the figures in the images were not mythical representations of struggle. They were documentary records of a species that had turned survival into an art form and war into a science. As she prepared to leave Nexus Prime, Dr. Vexani made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. She would return to her dig sites with new questions and better equipment. If the deathworlders had been real, their secrets might still be hidden among the ruins, waiting for someone to understand what they had found. The peaceful galaxy slept soundly that night, comfortable in the knowledge that the monsters of legend were safely buried in the past. But in the ruins of forgotten worlds, evidence waited patiently to be discovered, evidence that would prove the nightmares were real and that some legends never truly die. 3 months after the gathering at Nexus Prime, Dr. Vexani stood at the edge of a massive excavation site on the third planet of the Kepler 442 system. The world was classified as barren, too cold for most galactic species, with an atmosphere too thin to breathe and radiation levels that required protective suits. It was exactly the kind of place that budget-conscious administrators assign to archaeological expeditions. They did not expect to produce important results. But Dr. Vexani was no longer interested in important results. She was hunting for proof of impossible stories. Her team of 12 researchers worked carefully around the edges of what appeared to be a vast underground complex. The initial scans had shown regular geometric patterns buried beneath hundreds of meters of accumulated dust and debris. What they had uncovered so far defied everything they knew about ancient galactic civilizations. "Professor," called Dr. Kent, her senior excavation specialist. His environmental suit made him look bulky and awkward as he gestured toward a newly exposed section of wall. "You need to see this." Vexani made her way across the rocky terrain, her suit's systems working overtime to keep her comfortable in the harsh environment. As she approached the excavation, her breath caught in her throat. The wall was made of some kind of metal alloy that showed no signs of corrosion despite its obvious age. More importantly, it was covered with symbols that matched exactly the patterns she had been studying from her previous dig sites. But these symbols were not carved decorations. They were functional markings, labels, and what appeared to be warning signs. "Run a deep scan," she ordered. "I want to know what is behind this wall." The scanning equipment hummed for several minutes before producing a three-dimensional image that made the entire team fall silent. Behind the wall lay a vast chamber filled with structured objects, furniture, equipment, and what looked like massive storage devices. "Professor," whispered Dr. Morin, the team's youngest researcher, "the scans show artificial gravity generators, active ones. After all this time, they are still functioning." Vexani stared at the readouts. Artificial gravity was not unknown to galactic civilization, but it required enormous amounts of energy to maintain. The fact that these systems had been running for thousands of years suggested power sources beyond anything currently available. "Begin cutting through the wall," she decided. "But do it slowly. We do not know what we might disturb." It took 2 days to create an opening large enough for the team to enter. Dr. Vexani was the first to step through, her suit's lights illuminating. A space that took her breath away. The chamber was enormous, easily large enough to hold several starships. The walls rose into darkness above them, and corridors branched off in multiple directions. Everything was built on a scale that suggested beings roughly the same size as the figures in her artifact images, approximately 2 meters tall, built for strength rather than elegance. But it was the contents of the chamber that made her hands shake as she activated her recording equipment. Rows upon rows of sealed containers lined the walls, each one marked with those same symbols. In the center of the chamber sat massive rectangular objects that her scanner identified as data storage devices, and scattered throughout the space were pieces of equipment that looked functional despite their age. "My readings show atmosphere," reported Dr. Kent, his voice tight with excitement. "Not breathable for us, but stable. The environmental systems are still working." Vexani approached the nearest storage device carefully. It was built like a fortress, with multiple layers of protection and warning symbols covering every surface. As she drew closer, lights began to activate along its edges. "It knows we are here," she said softly. The device produced a series of sounds, tones, and rhythms that reminded her of language patterns. After a moment, a holographic display activated above the machine, showing symbols that shifted and changed. Dr. Morin pulled out his translation equipment and began running the symbols through the database of known galactic languages. After several minutes, he looked up with a confused expression. "Professor, the computer says this is not a language. It says these are mathematical progressions and scientific constants." "The device is testing us," Vexani realized. "It wants to know if we are intelligent enough to understand what we have found." She took out her own datapad and began working through the mathematical sequences. They were basic concepts, the relationship between energy and matter, the properties of different elements, the physics of stellar formation, Simple enough for any spacefaring civilization to understand, but presented in a way that demonstrated sophisticated knowledge. When she input the correct responses, the device made a sound that might have been approval. The holographic display changed, showing more complex symbols arranged in structured patterns. "It is a language," Dr. Kent breathed. "The mathematics were just the first test. Now it is teaching us how to read their actual writing system." For the next 6 hours, the team worked to decode the basic elements of what they would later learn was called English. The device was remarkably patient, repeating concepts and providing examples until they demonstrated understanding. When they finally accessed the first actual file, Dr. Vexani nearly dropped her datapad. It was a personal log, recorded by something calling itself Major Sarah Chen, Colonial Marine Corps 3rd Expeditionary Force. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear enough to chill them all. Day 47 of the evacuation. The orbital bombardment has stopped, but the radiation levels are still climbing. Command estimates we have maybe 6 hours before this place becomes completely uninhabitable. The civilians are loaded on the last transport, but half my unit is staying behind to make sure the automated defenses keep running. Someone has to guard the archives until the relief force arrives. If anyone finds this record, know that we held the line as long as we could. The log continued with technical details about radiation shielding, defensive positions, and weapons systems that made no sense to the archaeologists. But the emotional content was unmistakable. These had been living beings, facing death with determination and purpose. Dr. Morin accessed another file, this one labeled as a technical manual. The images that appeared on the screen made him step backward in shock. Detailed diagrams showed weapons capable of destroying entire cities, vehicles designed to function in environments that would kill most galactic species instantly, protective equipment that could withstand temperatures, pressures, and radiation, levels that exceeded anything in their databases. "These are not primitive beings," Dr. Vexani said quietly. "These are the most advanced warriors the galaxy has ever seen." As they explored deeper into the data archives, the picture that emerged was both fascinating and terrifying. The beings who had built this facility called themselves humans, and they had indeed evolved on a world that matched every detail of Commander Zthar's stories. But the reality was even more extreme than the myths suggested. Their home planet, Earth, was a nightmare world of competing predators, violent weather, and geological instability. But rather than simply surviving these conditions, the humans had embraced them. They had turned their world's hostility into a training ground that produced beings capable of functioning anywhere in the galaxy. The military records were the most disturbing. The humans had not just fought wars, they had perfected warfare as a science. They had developed strategies and technologies for conflicts on every scale, from individual combat to battles between star fleets. Their tactical manuals read like instruction guides for galactic conquest. But perhaps most unsettling were the personal records. Letters between family members, diary entries, and casual communications that revealed minds capable of both incredible violence and surprising compassion. These beings had loved, laughed, created art, and written poetry. They had also trained from childhood to kill efficiently and survive in conditions that would destroy entire galactic civilizations. "Look at this," called Dr. Kent from across the chamber. He had found a wall display showing what appeared to be a map of local star systems. Red markers indicated dozens of locations within a 50 light-year radius. Colony worlds, Dr. Vexani realized. They spread across this entire region of space. As they studied the map, the scale of human expansion became clear. What they had found was not an isolated outpost. It was one facility in a vast network that had covered hundreds of star systems. The humans had built an interstellar civilization that dwarfed anything the current galaxy had achieved. Dr. Morin discovered files that made the situation even more complex. The humans had not been conquerors in the traditional sense. Many of their colony worlds had been established on planets too hostile for other species to want. They had terraformed frozen worlds, toxic atmospheres, and radiation-soaked rocks, turning them into thriving colonies. But they had also encountered other species during their expansion. The records spoke of first contact protocols, diplomatic exchanges, and trade agreements. The humans had tried to be peaceful neighbors to the civilizations they encountered. Unfortunately, they had also prepared for the possibility that peace might fail. The weapons lockers they found contained devices that could level mountains. The defensive systems were designed to hold off fleet-sized invasions. The evacuation plans assumed that entire worlds might need to be abandoned in a matter of hours. "Professor," Dr. Moran said, his voice shaking, "I found the final entries in the historical archive. The last records told the story that Commander Zthar's myths had only hinted at. The humans had indeed destroyed themselves, but not through simple aggression. They had faced a choice between survival and principle, and they had chosen principle. An alien species, the records called them the Devourers, had begun consuming human colonies on the outer rim. These creatures were not interested in conquest or territory. They simply consumed all biological matter on every world they encountered, leaving nothing behind but empty rock. The humans had tried diplomacy, defense, and retreat. Nothing worked. The Devourers could not be reasoned with, could not be defeated by conventional weapons, and spread faster than human colonies could be evacuated. So the humans had made an impossible decision. They had developed weapons capable of destroying the Devourers and everything else in vast regions of space. The final war had consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing alive on either side. The survivors had scattered to distant galaxies, carrying with them the knowledge of what they had been forced to do. Earth had been left as a memorial, a dead world to remind any who found it of the price of absolute war. Dr. Vexani sat in silence for a long time after reading the final logs. Around her, her team continued exploring the archives, uncovering more and more evidence of a civilization that had been both the most advanced and most dangerous the galaxy had ever known. The legends had been true. Every impossible detail had been accurate. The humans had been real, and they had been everything. The myths described and more, but they were gone now, scattered across the void between galaxies or extinct entirely. The peaceful civilizations of the current galaxy could study their ruins and learn from their mistakes without fear of encountering them again. As Dr. Vexani prepared her preliminary report for the academic union, she felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that such dangerous beings were no longer a threat to galactic peace. Sadness that the galaxy had lost the knowledge and capabilities that humans had possessed. She ended her report with a recommendation that the human ruins be studied extensively, but carefully. There was much to learn from their technology and history, but she also recommended that the more dangerous aspects of human civilization be classified and restricted to prevent anyone from attempting to recreate their weapons or their methods. The galaxy was safer without the humans. But as she looked up at the stars through the dome of her temporary research station, Dr. Vexiani could not shake the feeling that safety might not always be enough. The universe was vast and full of unknowns. Someday, the galaxy might face threats that required more than peaceful cooperation to overcome. When that day came, they would have only ruins and records to remind them of the species that had once been strong enough to face any challenge and win, no matter the cost. News of Dr. Vexani's discovery spread through the academic union like wildfire. Within weeks, dozens of research teams received emergency funding and orders to investigate every unexplored ruin in their sectors. What they found changed their understanding of galactic history forever. The Kepler 442 site was not unique. Human ruins existed on 47 different worlds across 8 star systems, each one telling the same impossible story. These humans had not only existed, they had built an interstellar civilization that reached across a significant portion of what was now considered unexplored space. Dr. Vexani found herself leading a task force of over 200 researchers from 12 different species. Her modest archaeological expedition had become the most important scientific project in galactic history. But the more they discovered, the more disturbing the picture became. "The scale is unprecedented," reported Dr. Corvain during their weekly briefing. His crystal body chimed with excitement as he shared his findings from the Proxima Centauri ruins. "This facility alone could have housed 50,000 individuals. The life support systems were designed to maintain that population for over a century without external resources." Captain Thorne bubbled nervously in her water suit. "But why build such massive installations on dead worlds? Our scans show these planets were barely habitable even before the humans abandoned them." "Because they were not barely habitable for humans," Dr. Vexani explained, reviewing the environmental data from multiple sites. "Remember, these beings evolved on a death world. What we consider barely habitable, they might have considered comfortable." The evidence supported this theory. Human colonies had been established on worlds with crushing gravity, toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, and radiation levels that would kill most galactic species in minutes. Yet the infrastructure they found suggested thriving civilizations that had operated for thousands of years. Professor Lim Taco from the Crystalline Archives had spent months translating human technical manuals. "Their terraforming technology is extraordinary," he reported. "They could alter the atmospheric composition of entire worlds, adjust orbital mechanics to change climate patterns, and even relocate moons to modify tidal forces. That would require energy levels beyond our current capabilities," pointed out Dr. Morin. "How could they power such massive projects?" The answer came from deep space surveys. Long-range sensors had detected artificial structures orbiting dead stars throughout the former human territory. These massive constructions, some larger than planets, appeared to be devices for harvesting energy directly from stellar radiation. "Dyson spheres," Dr. Vexani breathed when she saw the first confirmed images. "They were building shells around entire stars to capture their energy output." The implications were staggering. A civilization capable of constructing Dyson spheres could power projects on a galactic scale. Terraforming worlds would become routine, moving planets would be possible. Even reshaping star systems would be within their reach. But the most shocking discoveries came from the deep space monitoring stations that had been searching for human ruins beyond planetary surfaces. What they found floating in the void between stars made the ground-based colonies seem small by comparison. "We have located what appears to be a derelict human vessel," reported Commander Velnash from the exploration ship Seeker of Truth. "The scale is difficult to comprehend." The images transmitted from the deep space expedition showed a structure that dwarfed any ship in the current galactic fleet. It was clearly artificial, built in sections that suggested modular construction. But it was also clearly dead. No energy signatures, no response to communications, and hull breaches that had been open to space for millennia. "We are preparing to board the vessel," Commander Velnash continued. "Initial scans show it is safe for exploration, though we will maintain full environmental protection." Dr. Vexani watched the live feed as the boarding party entered the human ship through one of the larger hull breaches. Their lights revealed corridors built on the same massive scale as the ground installations, but with subtle differences that suggested this had been a mobile habitat rather than a permanent colony. The ship's computer systems had failed long ago, but backup storage devices throughout the vessel contained fragments of records that painted a picture of humanity's final days. These were not military vessels or exploration ships. They were colony transports, massive arcs designed to carry entire populations between star systems. The personal logs they recovered were heartbreaking. Families saying goodbye to relatives on doomed worlds. Engineers working around the clock to keep life support systems functioning during journeys that lasted decades. Children being born, growing up, and having children of their own during voyages between distant stars. But there were also logs that revealed the true scope of human capabilities. Casual mentions of individual humans surviving in hard vacuum for extended periods while making repairs to the ship's hull. Records of colonists adapting to planetary environments that should have been instantly lethal. Reports of terraforming. Projects being completed in time frames that seemed impossible. "Listen to this entry," Dr. Morin said during their next briefing. He activated a translated audio log from one of the colony ships. Day 2847 of the journey to Wolf 359. The gravitational anomaly we encountered has damaged the hull in 17 locations. External repair teams report they will need another 6 hours to complete temporary patches. Rotation crews are handling the vacuum exposure well, no serious injuries so far. Little Sarah took her first spacewalk today for her 8th birthday. She lasted 43 minutes before needing to come inside for air. The kids adapt so much faster than we do. The casual tone of the log was more disturbing than any technical manual. These beings treated environments that would kill most galactic species as minor inconveniences. They sent children outside their ships to play in the vacuum of space. "How is this possible?" Captain Thorne asked, her water suit bubbling with distress. "No organic being can survive in hard vacuum. It is a physical impossibility." Dr. Corvain had been analyzing biological samples from the colony ships. "Their physiology is remarkable," he reported. "Bone density 3 times galactic standard. Cardiovascular systems designed for extreme pressure variations. Cellular structures that can temporarily shut down and restart. They were not just adapted for their homeworld, they were adapted for space itself." The colony ship records also revealed the true extent of human expansion. They had not colonized dozens of systems, they had colonized thousands. The ships carried detailed star charts showing human settlements scattered across a quarter of the galaxy, each one established, on worlds that other species could not or would not inhabit. They were not competing with other civilizations for resources, Dr. Vexani realized. They were claiming territory that no one else wanted. Dead worlds, hostile systems, radiation-soaked planets that we would not even consider visiting. But the records also showed that humans had encountered other species during their expansion. The ship's archives contained extensive files on dozens of alien civilizations, complete with language databases, cultural studies, and diplomatic protocols. Most disturbing were the military assessments that accompanied each species profile. The humans had not been content to simply study their neighbors. They had evaluated them as potential threats and prepared detailed battle plans for conflicts with each one. They were not aggressive, Dr. Vexani explained to the increasingly nervous research team, but they were always ready for aggression from others. Every first contact included plans for peaceful coexistence and plans for total war. The tactical documents were terrifying in their thoroughness. Humans had identified the weaknesses of every species they encountered: biological vulnerabilities, technological limitations, strategic resources, and social structures that could be exploited. They had developed weapons specifically designed to be effective against each potential enemy. More disturbing still were the psychological profiles. Humans had studied the minds of other species with the same intensity they applied to military planning. They knew how each civilization would likely respond to different types of pressure, what would motivate them to fight, and what would convince them to surrender. They were preparing for a war that never came, Dr. Morin observed after reviewing weeks of tactical analyses. All this planning, all these weapons, and there is no record of them ever being used against other galactic civilizations. Because the war that came was worse than anything they had planned for, Dr. Vexani replied grimly. The final colony ship logs told the story that the ground installations had only hinted at. The Devourers that had consumed human space were not a conventional enemy. They were something from outside the galaxy, a form of life that consumed all biological matter and converted it into more of themselves. The humans had tried everything. They had evacuated colonies, fought conventional battles, attempted diplomatic contact, and even tried to understand the Devourers well enough to coexist with them. Nothing worked. The alien force spread like a plague, consuming entire star systems and growing stronger with each victory. So humanity had faced an impossible choice. They could flee to other galaxies and allow the Devourers to consume every other species in their home galaxy. Or they could stay and fight a war that would require weapons capable of sterilizing vast regions of space. They chose to fight. The final logs were fragments, damaged by radiation and time, but the story they told was clear enough. Humans had developed weapons that could destroy matter at the subatomic level, turning entire star systems into empty void. They had sacrificed their own civilization to stop a threat that would have consumed the entire galaxy. The irony is profound, Dr. Vexani told the assembled research leaders during their final briefing. The beings that every species feared as monsters saved us all from something infinitely worse. They destroyed themselves to protect civilizations they had never met. Commander Velnash had spent months exploring derelict human ships throughout the sector. The evidence suggests that scattered groups of survivors escaped to other galaxies. The largest colony ships are missing from our survey data, and long-range sensors have detected fusion signatures consistent with human propulsion systems heading toward the Andromeda galaxy. So, some of them survived? Dr. Corvain chimed hopefully. Perhaps, Dr. Vexani agreed. But if they did, they are impossibly far away. The distance between galaxies is so vast that even human technology would require hundreds of thousands of years to cross it. As the research project entered its final phases, the team prepared comprehensive reports for the Galactic Council. Their findings would reshape everything the galaxy thought it knew about its own history and the dangers that might still exist in the universe. But privately, Dr. Vexani found herself wondering about those missing colony ships. Humans had proven capable of surviving in environments that should have been impossible. They had built technologies that seemed to defy physical limitations. They had sacrificed their entire civilization to protect others. If some of them had escaped to distant galaxies, what had they become during their long exile? Had they learned from the mistakes that had led to their civilization's destruction, or had they grown even more dangerous during their isolation in the cosmic void? These were questions that would have to remain unanswered. The survivors, if they existed, were too far away to matter to current galactic civilization. The galaxy could study human ruins and benefit from their technology without ever having to face the beings who had created it. Or so everyone believed. As Dr. Vexani filed her final report and prepared to return to normal archaeological work, she could not shake the feeling that the human story was not truly over. Somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, the descendants of Earth's children might still be traveling home. And when they arrived, the galaxy would discover whether 50,000 years of exile had made them into saviors or something far more dangerous. The deep space monitoring station, Eternal Watch, drifted in the empty void between galaxies. Its massive sensor arrays pointed toward the cosmic darkness that stretched beyond the rim of known space. For 300 years, it had maintained its lonely vigil, watching for threats that might emerge from the intergalactic void. In all that time, it had detected nothing but background radiation and the occasional dead comet. That changed on day 109,147 of its mission. Lieutenant Commander, Zendala was reviewing routine sensor logs when her screens erupted with alerts. The ethereal being's form flickered with surprise as data poured across her displays, artificial signals coming from a region of space that should have contained nothing but emptiness. "This cannot be correct," she muttered, her voice creating harmonic patterns that echoed through the station's command center. She ran the sensors through a complete diagnostic cycle, checking for equipment malfunctions or cosmic interference. The signals remained. Not only were they artificial, they were getting stronger. Within hours, Commander Zendala had transmitted an emergency alert to Nexus Prime. Within days, the greatest scientific minds in the galaxy were analyzing data that challenged everything. They thought they knew about the universe. Dr. Vexani arrived at the monitoring station aboard the fastest ship the Academic Union could provide. She had been preparing for a quiet retirement after her groundbreaking research into human ruins. Instead, she found herself facing evidence that her discoveries had been only the beginning of a far larger story. "Show me everything," she demanded. As soon as she stepped off the transport, Commander Zendala led her to the primary sensor array, where holographic displays showed the impossible data in three-dimensional detail. "The signals began 4 months ago," she explained. "Initial detection suggested a single source at extreme range, but as our sensitivity improved, we realized we were detecting multiple transmission points across a vast area. The display showed dozens of signal sources scattered across what the computers calculated as roughly 50,000 light-years of space. Each source was transmitting similar patterns, mathematical progressions, physical constants, and what appeared to be identification codes. "Have you been able to translate any of the content?" Dr. Vexani asked. "That is the disturbing part," Commander Zendala replied. "The mathematical constants match exactly with the measurement systems found in your human ruins. The signal structure is consistent with human communication protocols. But the transmission power required to reach us across intergalactic distances exceeds anything we thought possible." Dr. Vexani studied the data with growing unease. The signals were definitely artificial, definitely intelligent, and definitely using technology that matched human specifications, but they were coming from the space between galaxies, a region that should have been empty of all matter except sparse hydrogen atoms. "What is the transmission content?" she asked. Commander Zendala manipulated the display to show a decoded message that made Dr. Vexani's blood run cold. The transmission contained 3 elements, a set of astronomical coordinates that pointed to the Sol system, humanity's original home, a date 4 standard years in the future, and a single word in the ancient human language that their translation computers rendered as homecoming. Within hours of Dr. Vexani's arrival, emergency sessions of the Galactic Council were being called. Representatives who had listened to human legends with polite skepticism now faced the reality that those legends were very much alive and heading home. Ambassador Lumara's form flickered rapidly as she addressed the emergency assembly. "The implications are clear," she announced to the gathered representatives. "Humanity survived their exodus. They have not only endured 50,000 years in the intergalactic void, they have thrived there." The hall erupted in frightened chatter. Commander Zthar's scales had turned almost black with stress. "We always assumed they were extinct. How could any civilization survive in the emptiness between galaxies?" Dr. Vexani took the floor, her datapad displaying the latest analysis from the monitoring stations. "Based on the signal patterns, we are dealing with multiple groups transmitting from different locations. This suggests that humanity spread across vast distances during their exile. They may have established colonies in other galaxies or built massive space habitats in the void itself." "But why are they returning now?" asked Captain Thorne, her water suit bubbling with nervous energy. "They have survived on their own for millennia. What has changed?" The answer came from additional transmissions detected over the following weeks. As the galaxy's scientists worked around the clock to decode the human signals, a pattern emerged that was both fascinating and terrifying. The humans were not just announcing their return, they were conducting a survey of current galactic civilization. The transmissions included detailed scans of major star systems, population assessments of different species, and evaluations of current technology levels. "They are studying us," Dr. Corvain chimed ominously during a briefing at Nexus Prime, just as they studied other species during their original expansion. "The question is whether they view us as potential allies or potential threats." Minister Veltar's gray form trembled as he reviewed the most recent intelligence reports. "Our military advisors have attempted to model defensive scenarios against a returning human force. The results are discouraging. The wargaming had produced unanimous conclusions that no one wanted to hear. A species that had survived in intergalactic space for 50,000 years would possess technology far beyond anything the current galaxy could deploy. Their original weapons had been capable of sterilizing star systems. After millennia of continued development, they might be capable of reshaping galaxies. "We cannot fight them," Admiral Korthvar of the Combined Fleet admitted during a classified briefing. "Our best projections suggest that a single human ship from their original era could defeat our entire galactic navy. We have no data on what they might be capable of now. But the most unsettling aspect of the situation was not the humans' technological superiority. It was their apparent knowledge of current galactic civilization. The transmission suggested they had been monitoring the galaxy for thousands of years, watching as new species achieved spaceflight and peaceful civilizations developed. "They know everything about us," Dr. Vexani reported to the Council. "Our strengths, our weaknesses, our history, our cultures. They have been planning this return for longer than some of our civilizations have existed." As the appointed date drew closer, additional monitoring stations detected more signals coming from different directions. The humans were not returning as a single group. They were approaching from multiple galaxies, suggesting they had spread far beyond their original exodus routes. "The scale is beyond comprehension," Commander Zendala reported during a galactic broadcast that was transmitted to every civilized world. "We are detecting approach vectors from at least 7 different galaxies. This suggests human expansion across cosmic distances that we cannot even accurately measure." The galaxy fell into various stages of panic, denial, and desperate preparation. Some species advocated for immediate military mobilization, while others argued for diplomatic outreach. A few suggested attempting to hide or evacuate entire civilizations before the humans arrived. But as Dr. Vexani continued analyzing the transmissions, she began to notice subtle patterns that others had missed. The human signals were not just announcing their return, they were requesting permission. "Look at this transmission sequence," she told the assembled council representatives. "The mathematical progressions include what appear to be diplomatic protocols. They are not simply declaring their intention to reclaim their territory. They are asking for permission to return home." Ambassador Lumara's light pulsed with confusion. "Permission? From whom? They could simply take whatever they wanted." "Unless they no longer want to take anything," Dr. Vexani suggested. "The transmissions include extensive data about current galactic civilization. They know we have achieved peaceful cooperation between species. They know we have avoided the wars that destroyed their original society. Perhaps they are asking permission because they do not wish to disrupt what we have built." It was a hopeful interpretation, but one that raised as many questions as it answered. Why would a species capable of crossing intergalactic space concern itself with the opinions of civilizations they could easily conquer? What had happened to humanity during their long exile that would make them seek diplomatic contact rather than simply reclaiming their former territory? The debates raged for months as more signals arrived from the approaching human groups. Each transmission contained increasingly detailed information about galactic civilization, but also increasingly complex diplomatic protocols that suggested sophisticated governmental structures among the returning humans. "They are not the same species that left the galaxy," Dr. Vexani concluded during her final briefing before the appointed contact date. 50,000 years of survival in impossible conditions has changed them. The question is whether that change has made them better or worse. As the date specified in the original transmission approached, every deep space sensor in the galaxy focused on the Sol system. Long-range scans showed nothing unusual around humanity's dead homeworld. But the absence of visible activity was somehow more unsettling than any fleet of warships would have been. They could be there already, Admiral Korthvar pointed out, during the final military briefing. Human stealth technology from their original era was superior to our current detection capabilities. After 50,000 years of development, they could have entire fleets positioned throughout the system, without us knowing. The Galactic Council faced an impossible decision. They could send a diplomatic mission to the Sol system and risk losing their representatives to beings who might view them as insects. They could mobilize every military asset in the galaxy and risk provoking a war they could not win. Or they could simply wait and hope that humanity's intentions were peaceful. In the end, they chose a fourth option that would have made the original humans proud. They prepared for every possibility while hoping for the best. A small diplomatic mission would travel to Sol, equipped with both olive branches and the most advanced defensive systems the galaxy could provide. Meanwhile, evacuation plans were prepared for major population centers, and the combined fleet was positioned at strategic points throughout galactic space. As Dr. Vexani prepared to join the diplomatic mission to humanity's homeworld, she reflected on the irony of the situation. The species that had once been feared as monsters from ancient legends was about to make contact with the civilization that had grown up in their absence. The galaxy was about to discover whether the darkness between the stars had turned humanity into saviors or something far more dangerous. Either way, the age of peaceful isolation was coming to an end. In the depths of space, human ships that had traveled between galaxies for 50,000 years adjusted their courses toward a small yellow star that their ancestors had once called home. The time for hiding in the cosmic darkness was over. The children of Earth were coming home. The diplomatic vessel Harmony's Voice emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. Its sensors immediately focused on the small blue world that had once been humanity's home. Dr. Vexani stood in the observation deck, alongside representatives from 12 different species, each wearing protective equipment designed to function in environments that humans might consider normal. Earth hung in the void like a jewel, but a damaged one. Even from this distance, their scanners could detect the scars left by humanity's final war. Continents that should have been green were brown and gray. Oceans that should have teemed with life showed no biological signatures. The world that had given birth to the galaxy's most dangerous species was now just another dead rock orbiting a normal star. "No activity detected," reported Captain Velnash from the bridge. "The system appears as empty as our long-range surveys indicated." But Dr. Vexani was studying readings that made her increasingly nervous. "The background radiation levels are wrong," she said quietly. "They match the patterns we found in human ruins, but they are too organized to be natural decay." Before anyone could respond to her observation, every sensor on the ship activated at once. Space itself seemed to shimmer around them as something enormous decloaked directly in front of their vessel. The structure that appeared was impossible to describe in terms that made sense to galactic civilization. It was clearly artificial, but it followed no design principles they recognized. Parts of it seemed to exist in normal space, while other sections appeared to bend reality around them. It was larger than most space stations, but gave the impression of being just a small, part of something much greater. "Unknown vessel," came a transmission in perfect galactic standard. "You are approaching restricted space. Please state your intentions." Ambassador Lumara stepped forward, her ethereal form flickering with diplomatic protocols. "This is the Galactic Council diplomatic mission to the Sol system. We received your transmission requesting permission to return. We have come to discuss terms. There was a pause that lasted exactly 10 seconds, long enough to suggest careful consideration but short enough to indicate that the response had been prepared in advance. Permission to dock is granted. Follow the guidance beacons to Docking Bay 7. Be advised that our environmental standards may differ from galactic norms. As their ship was drawn toward the human structure by invisible forces, Dr. Vexani noted that none of their instruments could properly analyze what they were seeing. The human vessel, if it could be called a vessel, seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. Parts of it were clearly there, while other sections appeared as suggestions rather than solid matter. "How is this possible?" whispered Dr. Corvain, his crystal form chiming with confusion. 50,000 years of development, Dr. Vexani replied grimly. We are seeing technology that has had millennia to advance beyond anything we can understand. The docking process was smooth and efficient, though none of them could explain how their ship had been guided into what appeared to be solid matter. One moment they were approaching the structure's surface, and the next they were inside a bay that was clearly larger than the external dimensions should have allowed. As they prepared to disembark, Captain Velnash received detailed instructions about environmental conditions. The atmosphere was listed as breathable for most galactic species, but with warnings about gravity levels that were 1.3 times galactic standard and radiation levels that required minimal protective equipment. They are accommodating us, Ambassador, Lumara observed. This entire bay has been modified to make us comfortable. The airlock cycled open to reveal a corridor that was clearly designed by minds that understood galactic architecture but had improved upon it in subtle ways. The lighting was perfect for every species present. The gravity felt normal despite the readings that said it should have been crushing. The air carried scents that reminded each delegate of their homeworld. They were met by a single figure who appeared human according to the archaeological records, but with differences that immediately marked her as something new. She was tall, perhaps 2.5 meters, with the muscular build that the records suggested was normal for her species. But her skin had a subtle metallic sheen, and her eyes reflected light in ways that suggested modifications beyond natural evolution. "Welcome," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made each delegate feel she was speaking directly to them in their preferred communication style. "I am Dr. Sarah Chen, representing the Terran Remnant Coalition. We appreciate your willingness to meet with us." Dr. Vexani stepped forward, trying to hide her shock at hearing a name that matched one of the personal logs from the archaeological sites. "Dr. Chen, I am Dr. Vexani of the Academic Union. Are you related to the Sarah Chen who recorded the evacuation logs we discovered?" Dr. Chen smiled, and the expression was both completely human and subtly alien. "I am Sarah Chen, the same individual who recorded those logs 50,000 years ago. We have learned much about longevity during our time in the dark." The implications of that simple statement sent chills through the diplomatic team. This was not a descendant of humanity. This was an original human who had lived through their civilization's destruction and their species' long exile. "Please follow me," Dr. Chen continued, leading them down corridors that seemed to adjust their configuration as they walked. "I know you have many questions, and we have prepared facilities where we can speak comfortably." As they walked, Dr. Vexani noticed details that reinforced her growing understanding of how much humanity had changed. The walls showed displays that updated in real time with information about galactic civilization, population centers, technological capabilities, current political situations. The humans had not just been monitoring the galaxy, they had been conducting detailed sociological studies for millennia. The conference room they entered was a masterpiece of diplomatic design. It contained seating appropriate for every species present, environmental controls that maintained perfect comfort for each delegate, and displays that could present information in whatever format, each being found most comprehensible. Before we begin formal discussions, Dr. Chen said as they settled into their positions, I want to address the fear that I know you are all experiencing. Yes, we are the beings described in your ancient myths. Yes, we are capable of the things your archaeological records suggest, but we are not the same species that left this galaxy 50,000 years ago. She gestured to the displays around the room, which began showing images of human civilization during their long exile. What they saw was both amazing and terrifying. Massive structures floating in the void between galaxies, each one housing millions of individuals. Worlds that had been constructed rather than found, built to precise specifications in the emptiness of intergalactic space. Technologies that seemed to manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself. We learned, Dr. Chen continued, that survival in the void required more than just advanced technology. It required wisdom, cooperation, and patience on scales that our original civilization could never have imagined. The images showed human societies that had evolved beyond anything their archaeological records had suggested. Gone were the military hierarchies and competitive structures that had defined their original expansion. In their place were cooperative communities that spanned multiple galaxies, working together on projects that required thousands of years to complete. You destroyed yourselves once? Ambassador Lamara pointed out carefully. How do we know you will not do so again? Because we cannot afford to, Dr. Chen replied simply. In the void between galaxies, cooperation is not just preferable. It is the only way to survive. Those who could not learn to work together did not live long enough to have descendants, Dr. Corvain chimed with curiosity. But why return now? You have clearly built a successful civilization in exile. Why risk contact with a galaxy that might fear you? Dr. Chen's expression grew serious. Because this galaxy is about to face threats that peaceful cooperation alone cannot handle. We have been monitoring more than just your civilizations. There are things moving in the cosmic dark, intelligences and forces that make the Devourers look like a minor inconvenience. The displays around the room changed to show long-range sensor data that made the diplomatic team fall silent. Massive structures were moving through intergalactic space, following trajectories that would bring them into contact with their galaxy within a few thousand years. The energy signatures suggested technologies that dwarfed even human capabilities. The universe is not a safe place, Dr. Chen continued. During our exile, we have encountered forces that view entire galaxies as resources to be consumed. Most of them have not yet noticed your galaxy because it has been relatively quiet and peaceful. But that is changing. She showed them data about galactic energy output, population growth, and technological development. The peaceful expansion of galactic civilization was creating signals that would eventually attract attention from things that fed on civilizations. We offer ourselves as guardians, Dr. Chen said. Not rulers, not conquerors, but protectors. We have learned to fight things that exist beyond normal space and time. We have developed technologies that can hide entire galaxies from cosmic predators. We can teach you to defend yourselves against threats you do not yet know exist. Captain, Velnash spoke carefully. And what do you ask in return? Permission to come home, Dr. Chen replied. We want to rebuild Earth, not as a center of empire, but as a memorial to what we learned. We want to establish research stations in this galaxy to monitor cosmic threats. And we want to share our knowledge with civilizations that have achieved what we could not, lasting peace. The negotiations that followed lasted for weeks. The human proposals were comprehensive and detailed, covering everything from territorial boundaries to technology transfer protocols. But they were also, surprisingly, generous. Humanity was not seeking to reclaim their former territory or to impose their authority on existing civilizations. Instead, they wanted to establish a network of monitoring stations that would watch for cosmic threats while studying galactic civilization. They offered to share defensive technologies and scientific knowledge in exchange for cultural and philosophical insights from species that had achieved peaceful coexistence. "You have accomplished something remarkable," Dr. Chen told the assembled delegates during their final session. "You have created a galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. We want to learn from that achievement while helping you protect it." Dr. Vexani found herself studying the human representative with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "How do we know you will not change? Power has a way of corrupting even the best intentions." Dr. Chen smiled sadly. "Because we have already been corrupted by power, and we have learned the price of that corruption. We destroyed our own civilization rather than repeat the mistakes that power tempts us to make. The safeguards we have built into our society are designed by beings who know exactly how dangerous we can be." The final agreement was unlike any treaty in galactic history. Humanity would be granted permission to establish research stations and memorial sites throughout their former territory. In exchange, they would provide early warning systems for cosmic threats and share defensive technologies with any civilization that requested them. But the most important part of the agreement was the oversight clause. Human activities would be monitored by joint galactic committees, and any sign of aggressive expansion would trigger immediate diplomatic intervention. "We do not ask you to trust us completely," Dr. Chen said as the documents were signed. "We ask you to trust the safeguards we have built and the monitoring systems we are volunteering to accept. If we become a threat to galactic peace, we want you to have the tools necessary to stop us." As the diplomatic mission prepared to return to Nexus Prime, Dr. Vexani found herself alone with Dr. Chen in the observation deck, looking out at the dead world that had once been Earth. "Will you really rebuild it?" she asked. "Not as it was," Dr. Chen replied, "but as it could be. A world that remembers both the beauty and the horror of what we were and celebrates what we have become. And if other threats come? If the galaxy faces enemies that even you cannot handle?" Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Then we will face them together. We have learned that the universe is too dangerous for any species to survive alone, no matter how strong they think they are." As the Harmony's voice departed the Sol system, its crew carried with them the most important news in galactic history. Humanity had returned, not as conquerors, but as guardians. The monsters of legend had become something new, beings who had learned that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to protect. The galaxy would never be the same, but for the first time in 50,000 years, it might actually be safe. In the years that followed, human research stations appeared throughout the galaxy, each one monitoring cosmic threats while studying the civilizations they protected. Earth was slowly rebuilt as a living memorial to the price of unchecked aggression and the value of hard-won wisdom. And in the vast darkness between galaxies, ancient intelligences that had noticed the growing energy signatures from the galactic rim found their attention blocked by technologies they could not understand, deployed by beings who had learned to be more dangerous than the universe itself. The children of Earth had indeed come home, and they had brought with them the greatest gift any species could offer, the knowledge of how to survive in a universe that was always trying to kill you.